I am currently working on a 3D open world RPG in Unity called Adventure World, and I made a video about it about 2 weeks ago. It was uncommentated, and I didn't have nearly as much as I have now, so I'm revisiting it now that I've gotten quite a bit more progress, and I'm going to explain to you what this project is. So the point of this project at the moment is less about the game itself, or even about the characters or story of Adventure World, which you don't need to understand at the moment. That doesn't come in until much later. But rather, this project is more about my attempt at making a 3D open world RPG. I recently played Breath of the Wild for the first time in years, and while I was playing it, I kind of rediscovered my love for open world RPGs, or not necessarily RPGs, but just open world games in general. Now, the Adventure World series has always kind of been an RPG, and so I thought maybe I could revisit it and make it in 3D. I already tried that before, but that was back when I was first starting with Unity, so I didn't get very far, and it was very overwhelming and very difficult. I didn't really know where to start or what to even do. But now that I've had a lot more experience, and I'm a lot more comfortable making games in Unity, I've decided to come back to this monumental project. So one of the first things that I added to this project was the character models. All these characters actually use the same model, they just use special textures to give them their coats. In fact, let me see if I can show you. This, for example, is the texture for Molly's coat. Molly is the main character, she's the one that you see walking around. And perhaps you can see just by looking at the model and the texture side by side what these colors actually represent. This red actually represents the main color, and you can see that for Molly, the main color on her coat is black. This green here represents the secondary color, which is white for Molly, and blue is the tertiary color, which for Molly is like this orangish brown. And of course, black ends up being black in the final texture, which works pretty good for the nose. If I go over here, we can actually look at Max's texture. No, that's Bart, sorry. Max's texture. And his primary, you can see, is white. No, actually, I stand corrected. His primary color is that tannish color. You can see that's what corresponds to red. And it looks like green, the secondary color, is actually white. And he has this dark gray as his tertiary color. And maybe you also notice on the texture that there are some kind of dark yellowish parts. Those correspond to his ears, actually. You can see that it is smoothly going between the orangish part of his coat and the white part of the coat to create that tan color. And of course, that just comes naturally from mixing the colors like that. Because by mixing red and green, I get a mix of the primary and secondary colors. So that's how I pulled that off. If we go to Bart's coat, Bart is over here. He's kind of in shadow. That's Bart. He only has two colors, a brown and a darker brown, and you can see that I use the same trick for the ears to get an intermediate brown. And Seth over here is the least interesting one. He's just got a solid coat, so it's just a solid red texture. Now, the animations for these characters I made myself. I didn't make them in Blender or anything. I actually made them directly in Unity by just posing the model and using the record feature for the animations, and I think it turned out pretty good. I mean, especially for someone who doesn't actually have any background in 3D animation. I think it actually came out pretty good. The thing about this game is I am by no means trying to make it look good or impressive. I'm just trying to make it at all. And so anything that I can come up with is good, in my opinion. That is, anything that I can come up with successfully. And I'm actually really proud of these animations. So you've already seen walking. We've got running. We also have, if I can go up the staircase, we also have falling and landing if the fall is long enough. So not all falls will cause that animation. That almost looked like the animation played, but it was just the transition between falling and walking. So if I actually get that landing animation, I'm prevented from walking for a short period because, of course, your character is trying to recover their balance. Hi, Bart. I've also got a swimming and wading animation that I made. I'll be honest, I'm not as impressed with these as I am with the other animations, but I'm still actually pretty happy with them. The wading animation is really simple, just the character kicking their legs and kind of moving their arms a little bit. And the swimming animation is whatever this is called. You can see that the lunge is animated, but the character's movement is actually continuous. Here we go. This is a really great way to demonstrate it. I don't know why there's this weird white box that showed up for a second, but you can see that the character controller is actually moving at a consistent speed, but the animation is causing the character to appear to lunge forward. And also, the bobbing is even animated as well. See, the character controller is just completely static, not actually bobbing. And the actual floating mechanic is really simple as well. It's just two different mechanics that combine to create this effect. There's buoyancy and drag, and buoyancy is a force that gets applied upwards that is proportional to your depth in the water. So the deeper you are, the greater the force. It's kind of like the inverse of gravity almost. And drag is a force that fights your velocity that is proportional to your velocity. So the faster you're moving, the stronger that force fighting it is. And those two things, just those two things combined, along with a little threshold that actually makes it to where you have to go further out of the water than you were in to actually be counted as not in the water. That probably didn't make much sense, but those two basic things plus that one little threshold makes for what I think is pretty convincing water physics. It's really simple, it works really well, and I'm also pretty proud of that. And I'm also quite proud of this little water shader that I've got here. It's pretty neat. It's got tinting that gets stronger the deeper the water is. So over here where it's shallow, mostly the color behind it shows through, but for the deeper parts, the color behind it is tinted. And the reflection is actually a cool trick that I learned from a video by Jasper. I believe it was called How Scrolling Textures Give Super Mario Galaxy Its Charm. Let's see if I can't modify the shader just a little bit and show you what's going on. Alright, there we go. So we have this texture that is just scrolling over the water. It's a grayscale texture. And we also have the same texture scrolling perpendicularly to it. Those two textures are multiplied and we get something that already looks pretty watery. And then what I do is I convert that grayscale texture into alpha. And we can see that already, again, it already looks water-like, but we can actually improve this effect. So what I'm doing next is I'm actually clipping the pixels that are above a certain brightness threshold, and that's defined by this slider. So as I move it down, you can see the brighter pixels kind of disappearing, and it already looks a lot like a reflection, even though there's not actually any reflection logic going on at all. And then after that, I'm actually keeping pixels that are above a certain brightness threshold, and that is defined by this slider right here. And if we get it to about 0.5, which is where I had it before, now you can see highlights in the water. And I think that effect, which is borrowed from Super Mario Galaxy, looks pretty good already. Now the other part of the effect involves just drawing whatever is behind the water. So it looks like I've gotten rid of the water, but what I've actually done is change the shader to just draw whatever's behind it. Now this is different from transparency, as in making it fully translucent. This is actually a completely opaque plane that you are looking at. It's actually showing what's behind it as its texture. Next, I'm using information from the depth buffer to calculate a tint color for the water. And we can see that it's white where it's really shallow, and kind of this bluish color where it's really deep. We can multiply that with the pixels that are drawn behind the water to give this tinted effect. And it already looks pretty neat. It almost looks like a swimming pool to me. That's what it kind of reminds me of. Now, the last thing I'm doing before the actual last step is also using that information from the depth texture to give this foam effect. I'm basically multiplying that color you saw earlier by the grayscale map that we were using, which makes it whiter over here where it's shallow, but otherwise it just uses the grayscale texture unchanged to calculate the reflections. And finally, the last thing to do is to combine those two effects. And now we have the water as it currently is. Pretty neat. Another thing I implemented is the ability to enter houses. So you can walk up to a door and press B to enter, and it plays this little animation, fades to black and then fades out, and we're in a room. Please ignore this staircase. It is only for testing purposes. Now this room actually exists pretty far below the map, and I can actually demonstrate it using this forbidden staircase. Here we go. We can see that we're actually... There's the void out mechanic. I'm gonna have to restart. Okay, let's try that one more time. If I walk up this staircase carefully, walk to about here, you can see that this room is actually enclosed in a black inverted box, and we can see that the game world is actually pretty high up above us. I fell again. Okay, when we're done in here, we can leave by walking up to this door and pressing B, and now we have this neat little animation of us walking out of the house, and the door closes behind us. So that's the whole going in and out of buildings mechanic. That one works fine. Now, I don't think I showed this off in the last video. I don't even know if it was done at that point, but we can talk to NPCs. Actually, wait, I think I did show it off, but it's gotten some changes. I can talk to Max right now, and he says, "Yo, Molly, did you notice this weird hole in the ground?" And if we continue, the camera actually pans to show us this weird hole. So the dialogue system now has the ability to cue things to happen in-game, such as the camera moving. Now Max tells us to avoid this hole because it looks scary, but it's actually fine because there's water down here. And there's actually a way to get back to the map by swimming out of this water, into this water, and swimming in through this conveniently placed hole in the terrain, which is also for testing purposes. There's a lot of testing purposes things. I think that's about everything I have to show you. I mean, there's this monstrosity that is used for testing a few mechanics, specifically falling and sliding. I guess I could show you sliding real quick, because I don't think that was in the previous video. If I get on a steep slope, I slide. So that's pretty neat. And there's this item that doesn't actually do anything. I can't actually pick it up. I'm thinking that the next thing I might implement might be the inventory system, but I don't know. I guess I just have one last thing to show you. At the end of the previous video, I walked up to that brown cube, and it triggered some weird cutscene that probably didn't make much sense. That is actually the battle system. My idea is to, strange enough, put a 2D 8-bit retro-style turn-based combat into a 3D open-world RPG. Don't ask me why, it's just the idea I had. Of course, I never got any further beyond just that idea. I don't even really know what to do for the combat itself. So right now it's just this little thing where you walk up to an enemy, it plays the little cutscene, and you get soft locked. But now there's actually music that plays, and it's some music that I made specifically for the battle system. So I guess that's what I'll leave off this video with, is just showing off this cool music that I made that I really like. Alright, that's all I have for this video. Thank you so much for watching, especially if you got this far. I know this probably isn't the most interesting thing, but I do appreciate the people who leave positive comments. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video, I guess.